Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers. Brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durrag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land that this podcast was created on.
I'm just going to yeet this thing into space. Here we go. Welcome to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast. Podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers, because sometimes we feel like prose and sometimes we feel like dirty cons. I'm Paddy Boylan. I haven't hosted in a really, really long time. This feels weird, but I'll be your host for today. And joining me are 2/3 of Precipice Fiction, my esteemed friends and colleagues, James Healy.
Hello, I'm James Healy. I'm an editor and writer of short stories, mostly horror, science fiction, and I'm best known for Cooling Engines, which was my contribution to the new Mythic anthology.
And Phoenix Raig.
Hello, yes, Phoenix Raig. Also, I'm not hosting, but I feel like I haven't been on an episode in a long time. Yeah, my name's Phoenix. I'm also an editor. I'm the founder of Bentlight Writing, an editing house that puts authenticity reading forward. And some fun bit of news on the editing front. One of the children's books that I helped someone edit a little bit ago actually went on to get the highest rating from the Forward Reviews, which is a collection of it's a bunch of librarians that get together to review independently published children's books, to actually rate them and tell people these are worth reading. This is what's like, of all the independently published stuff, these are the ones that are actually like, we give them like the librarian stamp of approval or whatever. And it got a gold rating on that. Or it's an award. So you have to be nominated and then you can win gold, silver, or bronze, and it won gold. So
Phoenix, that is really good news.
Yeah, I was really pumped about that.
Yeah. It's like seeing your children go out into the world and do something.
I know.
Remarkable.
I know.
Yeah, hell yeah. Actually, I have some news as well. I'm Paddy Boylan. I am a writing teacher, ex-writing editor, and also right now I'm getting into narrative-based video games, or trying to, which has been a ton of fun. Just dipping my toes in. But a friend and I are working on a narrative-based game at the moment, and it's been a hoot. It's been a riot. I have some news as well. A student of mine who I used to teach they applied for some kind of creating writing course at Cambridge University, like the Cambridge. Ooh, and they got in. Yeah,
wow.
They got in. So I'd like to think that I was like a microscopic sliver of them getting in.
Absolutely.
That makes me feel better. Yeah. So shout out to Emma. She knows who she is. Anyway, gentlemen, today we are going to do Deus Ex Machinas, one of the most, I'm going to say loathed, I was always going to say mistakes, one of the most loathed things in writing, one of the things that, of all of the bugbears of writing, this is the thing that one of the things that people say is most avoid this, don't do this. Now, is that something you guys would agree with straight off the bat? That Deus Ex Machinas are like, just don't do it. Just never do it.
I would definitely agree with try not to do it. Yeah, it's kind of I would see it as a no-go zone.
Okay, and Phoenix?
Mm-hmm. I would say if you're gonna do it, you better be doing something interesting with it. Like almost at this point, if someone were to do it, it would be not satire off it, but it'd be in conversation with the history of Deus Ex Machina. So it's like, I'm going to use Deus Ex Machina almost from a meta level to kind of like, I actually want to do something interesting with Deus Ex Machina. Like if that's what they're kind of trying to do, it's a bit of an artistic decision and it works, cool. But as a actual writing tool, I would just say no. I wouldn't consider it a tool. It's like something to watch out for.
Okay, strong feelings all around. What are Deus Ex Machinas? We will get to that soon. So if you're sitting here thinking like, what are they actually talking about? I don't know what this is. We'll come right back around to this. But first of all, gentlemen, what have you been watching, reading, playing lately? What about you, James? What have you been? What's on your bookshelf at the moment?
I've been reading Kurt Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, which I'm absolutely loving.
It's good, isn't it?
A wonderful writer. Yeah, it's so good. He's so clever. Like he's condensing like some really good ideas and some really good conversations into like very short sections of just 2 pages. It's very subtle, but it's very, very clever. His writing is lovely, so I'm really enjoying that. And I've started watching Succession, Just
Okay.
quite good. If everyone's familiar, I feel like everyone's probably watched it. I'm very late to the party there.
I haven't seen it.
But yeah, it's really good. Just kind of about this family, that kind of are the father is the head of a massive media corporation, and then the kids are kind of like, I suppose, somewhat competing, and then somewhat trying, almost not wanting to compete, for his attention and his approval and more power within the company. So it's full of kind of family dynamics, manipulation, lies. No one trusts anyone. They're all horrible people. It's really, really good.
They're horrible people. So I've
Yeah.
actually only watched the first few episodes, and I think I'm the only person in the world who hasn't really enjoyed it. I just thought, oh, these people are awful. I don't want to spend a
Yeah.
whole season with them.
Mm.
I'm going to go back and watch the whole thing because everyone says it's great. But
Yeah, I feel I mean, I watched the first 2 episodes years ago, said that looks brilliant, and then I came back and I kind of felt like it was going to keep building, but it doesn't. It kind of just simmers at that place. So I initially had a bit of a, oh, it's not going to go anywhere, is it? And then I kind of realized, like, I actually just enjoy this like unpleasant dynamic. There's something about the as individual characters, they're not that interesting. It's how they all fit together. Like the ensemble is interesting. You could kind of just, I feel like you could just tune in and watch them have a family dinner, and they're all, you know, not quite saying what should be said and being a bit salty and reminding each other. And I was like, yeah, we can just run with that. Like, that's enough.
just watching awful people do awful things.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
I've been reading, what is it called? I bought a collection of short stories. Actually, I bought it when I was in Ireland. But I bought a collection of short stories from Robert Louis Stevenson. He's the author of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, lovely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That was like the primary one on the cover that it was kind of pushing forward. And I've almost made my way all the way through. I'm on the last one, which is just like I'm reading it for the sake of getting all the way through. The last one is dense as hell, and it felt like it was written for like his local community or something. Like the way the people talk, he's from Scotland, and the way the people talk, it feels very like insular to Scotland. So I feel like this must have hit for someone really hard. I don't think I'm the audience for this one, but it's also very old, like 1800s writing, so it's like it's dense. But he had one in there called The Bottle Imp that I really liked, really short snapper one. But
I love that name.
Yeah,
that's a name that immediately grabs you, isn't it?
Right? Yep.
The Bottle Imp.
Yep. Robert Louis Stevenson, The Bottle Imp. That one's great. I've also been making my way through The Three Body Problem. Slowly but surely. Actually, yesterday I went to a cafe and had, for the first time in a long time, like a full casual reading session. I've been very busy and doing a lot of editing recently, and it's actually been hard for me to read casually recently, but I had a good time yesterday.
Nice. Reading in a cafe is kind of the dream, isn't it? It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, got a little hyper on coffee and read. And then I did start playing Paddy. I said I was thinking about playing the Sea of Stars. I started playing it yesterday. Oh, yeah, sorry.
I think you're gonna say Games of Cud. I got so excited.
No.
Yeah.
But I started the Sea of Stars, or just Sea of Stars, and I very much like it. So
yeah, it looks real cool.
That was fun.
Yeah, very cool. So I've started well, actually I just finished reading Robert Harris's The Second Sleep, which is a book. Yeah, so you're nodding away, James. So James got me into Robert Harris as an author. He did, if anyone's seen the film Conclave, he wrote the book that's based on. Really cool historical fiction writer, and there is no way of describing what happens in The Second Sleep without giving it all away. So I'm not going to try. James, would you say the end of The Second Sleep was kind of a Deus Ex Machina?
Oh, I wouldn't. But
granted, we haven't defined what it is yet, but we will get there.
Yes, I mightn't be thinking of the same thing. I remember finding it a bit of yes. I know what you mean. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I guess it felt like it could have happened. If I'm thinking of the same, if we're thinking of the same thing, something collapses. Is that what you're thinking of? Something collapses. I guess I was thinking that was a bit easy for them to get out of the situation they were in the end. I didn't feel like it necessarily, for me, Deus Ex Machina is a lot more egregious if it resolves the whole conflict of the story.
Yeah.
if it
Which is the
resolves the
traditional
scene,
definition of.
or if it just resolves the, sometimes you set up a climax and then the climax is resolved a little bit easy. I'm like, oh, they got out of this scene by Deus Ex Machina. It's kind of disappointing, but it's not as, it doesn't put me off the whole story as much as when it's like when the whole story builds up to something and then they do a Ex Machina out of it.
Agreed. And we've probably beat around the bush for long enough now. Let's actually define this thing. Does either of you guys want to give a definition of what you think or see a Deus Ex Machina as being?
Yeah, I guess I'll leave the proper definition to you because
Okay.
I know.
Well, I mean,
even
I've seen a few definitions online actually. It gets a little bit
okay.
wibbly wobbly, so give it a bash.
I guess I would say a Deus Ex Machina is when essentially when the problem of the story, or when any problem really is kind of resolved in a way that hasn't been set up or doesn't make sense. So it kind of feels like, I'm trying not to use the actual phrase, but it kind of feels like either the writer or something from outside has just come in and contrived for things to resolve themselves. Something has just come out of nowhere and saved the day. And yeah, resolve the conflict or like rescue the characters out of somewhere. So I think the example is if you've set up that your characters have to face some big evil or they have to resolve some kind of family issue, and then kind of right in the end, someone just walks in and hands them all a piece of paper, being like, "Oh, it's actually resolved," and then that's the end of your story. You're kind of like, "Oh, that's very disappointing." And you've read a whole story to get to that point.
I think that's a pretty solid definition. Phoenix, agree with that? Disagree with that? Any differences in that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yep, I agree with that. I'll just leave it there.
Easy. Excellent. Now, so a Deus Ex Machina, from what I've seen, is pretty much that. It's when a hopeless situation is suddenly resolved by an unexpected occurrence. So say you've got the plot, you've reached a point where the characters seem like they're screwed and nothing's going to go right, and oh no, how will they possibly get out of this? And something which is unheralded and unforeshadowed seems to come from outside of the plot, like the hand of God almost, and reaches in and changes things in a just so way so that the protagonist situation, usually the protagonist situation, can be resolved favorably. And why do we not like it? I mean, because it feels kind of cheap, right? When we talk about like what makes a good twist, I think it's almost always that even if you didn't see the twist coming, you think like, but I could have seen it coming. There were enough clues, there were enough things pointing towards it to suggest that like, yeah, okay, I see how this happened. I see how this was set up. It was there all along if only I knew how to look for it. A Deus Ex Machina, on the other hand, feels annoying because it seems like there's nothing to indicate that it might have happened. It's just kind of happening. And you think like, why? Why did I read this whole story with this chain of events just to have this unexpected thing come in at the end and completely interrupt that chain? So we're going to be talking about this today. We're going to give some examples. We're going to talk about hopefully how to avoid it in the writing process. But also, I'd like to talk a little about at the end about when it can not be a good thing necessarily, but some examples of stories that have done it and definitely done it, but it actually kind of works for them. I'm looking at you, War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, much
Yeah.
beloved, incredibly famous lauded science fiction story that absolutely ends in a Deus Ex Machina. So, guys, do you have any examples straight off the bat of a Deus Ex Machina you've seen that of a Deus Ex Machina you've seen? I was going to say that pisses you off, but just like let's throw some examples out there for the listeners if we have some.
Yeah, I've got a few that I guess are examples of Deus Ex Machina, but I feel like they work, or I feel like the writer has done something
Okay.
with it to make it work.
Mm.
I think you use a phrase there, unheralded. So I think that most of the Deus Ex Machinas that I like, they kind of make sense. They fit within the context of the story.
Mhm.
I might leave them to later when we're talking about the ones that aren't as egregious. But yeah, when you say that like it pisses people off, I think that the fact that I've probably talked about each of these stories, I've probably talked about each of these problems before in this podcast is power to the cause of like how much these endings piss me off. So
This is good.
I think probably the worst one that I can think of is Memoirs of a Geisha,
Okay.
which is a story that I was really, really, really enjoying.
Yep.
And as you move towards, so just
Oh,
to fill
can I
everyone.
interrupt just quickly? We should probably say that there may be spoilers in this
Yes.
episode.
Oh
It's
yeah,
hard
yeah.
to talk. A Deus Ex Machina is something that tends to come in at the very end of the story. So if we're talking about something and you don't want a spoiler, maybe just skip ahead a minute or two in the podcast. Okay.
Hmm.
Sorry, James. You were talking
No,
about
good
Memoirs of a
call.
No, no,
Geisha.
no, all good. I'm going to do a full spoiler now for the ending of Memoirs of a Geisha.
Okay.
So if anyone's interested in reading it,
Yeah.
maybe tap out for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So Memoirs of a Geisha is a story about a young woman who kind of loses one of her parents, and the other parent can't support her, and she ends up getting kind of sold or given away to this house, where she becomes a servant, and I think she works her way into being a geisha. Geishas are kind of like female entertainers for men, and their kind of deal is that they kind of become like very valued because people want them, and then they kind of get married off to someone. I think that was essentially the situation. And so the story takes place like right before, I think, World War II. War comes to Japan, so she just ends up in like really dire straits. All of the towns are getting like shut down. People are leaving the towns because of bombings, and the geisha house she's a part of kind of gets dissolved, I think. And she ends up being sold off to someone who she is friends with but doesn't love. So the situation that she's in is that she's sort of looking at the rest of her life, and all my life is going to not have anything good in it. I'm about to just be kind of this man's wife. And even though he's a friend and I'll be safe and it'll be comfortable, it's not what I want. And we come to the end of the story, and there's this man who's kind of popped up in the story from time to time, who is the man who she really, like, her heart stops when she's around him. He's the one that she really wants. And she's sort of trying to angle herself into a situation where he takes her on instead as a wife. And she kind of incorporates the assistance of a friend of hers who she doesn't recognize hates her, but we understand that this woman hates her because they had like rivalry and competition as geishas. So you end up coming into the third act of this story, kind of recognizing that this woman like isn't happy with the situation she's in, but she's made moves and made plays to try to get herself the life she wants. But it's all so tenuous, and it's all hanging by such a it's hanging by threads that don't seem like she can pull them together. And she's kind of trusted this person who we know she shouldn't have trusted, and then it all blows up in her face, and she's kind of left with nothing. She's broken the friend's heart. The friend doesn't want to take her on. This man who she loved didn't seem interested, and I don't remember if the friend necessarily betrays her, but certainly it all kind of falls apart. And you kind of get that sense of like, oh, it's like that has that drama of being like, oh, she nearly had it all, and she kind of made a move and it all wrong. And then in the next scene, this love interest invites her up to his house and is like, oh, I always loved you. I'm really rich. I can take you on. You're really beautiful. And because you're really beautiful, like, I've always wanted you.
You've talked about this before, actually.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioning this and being really frustrated with it.
I remember finding it such a mad like smack in the face. Even the way I've described it probably has more narrative flow than it was in the book, because it just felt like it came out of nowhere, and it kind of felt like you were kind of like, oh, have they created this big bomb to go off in her face? And it was just kind of like, no, it's cool. You're hot. You do not realize you're hot, and I'm rich, so I'm like, it's all good. Don't worry about it. I was like,
you don't realize you're hot. I'm rich. It's all good. Like, we're fine.
And the audience could have seen that coming. No, they couldn't. No, that sounds really frustrating.
It seemed to be so like it was not, it didn't seem to be in keeping with any of the rest of the story as well. Like, none of that seemed to be getting set up as
I was so mad.
Yeah.
I watched the movie. I didn't read it, but yeah, I watched the movie. I saw like the movie ended and I was like, what happened? Like, what did I just see? Because it was, I didn't think of it as a Deus Ex Machina, but it definitely is, because you have this big like piling of circumstances, big fallout, and literally it's just like there's no repercussion. There's no repercussion comes from it.
Yes.
But then this is just a different discussion, but thematically the story is like the whole thing is showing the audience like the fault of the patriarchy, and look at this scenario she's in because of this, and the thing that saves her at the end is a man who's rich, and I'm just like, what is going on? Like,
yeah. So you said
gosh.
something there about repercussions. I hadn't considered this, and I want to ask you for an example of Deus Ex Machina as well. But just while it's in my mind, I think there is something about that. Like, you expect a film's conclusion to be the repercussions, right? the film is building to a point, and then you need to have like the cogs in the machine turn to an endpoint. But a Deus Ex Machina completely interrupts that. So the example I have, and sorry, Phoenix, can I give my
No,
example
no.
first? I
Yeah,
know it's kind of
yeah.
like bad
No.
for the host to like jump in with it, but the example I had was an original Greek play, because the phrase Deus Ex Machina means God from the machine, and it comes from old Greek plays where they had a habit of ending things by having some kind of divine intervention lowered down on a rope or a crane to just end the story in a just so way, because it seemed, well, I'll give the example. There is a play called Medea by a guy called Euripides. And Medea has done some really terrible things. She's the protagonist. She's committed these horrific acts of revenge. She's killed the king, his daughter, even her own children. There's no way that she can escape justice. What's she gonna do? Okay, well, it turns out she is the daughter of the sun god Helios, and she goes off stage for a little bit, and then she's lowered down in a flying chariot pulled by dragons, and the flying chariot can just take her away so she doesn't have to face any consequences. And
Mm.
that's the end. That's the end of the play. And if I was in the audience during that Greek play, I would have been like, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, what? What? Come on. Because, yeah, there's no. What was the word you used, Phoenix? Was it repercussions or
Yeah,
consequences?
repercussions. Yeah.
There's no repercussions. Nothing happens to her. She doesn't have to answer to anything. It's just solved in like, well, and that's it. She happens to be the. Hmm. I'm frustrated for the people of Greece 3,000 years ago.
That really sounded like I'm upset for the people of Greece 3000. My mind
I,
registered it as that first as Greece 3000. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a badass movie.
Greece 3,000 coming soon. Anyway, that was my example. Phoenix, did you have an example of a Deus Machina that you've seen that you have feelings about?
Um, I have sort of meta feelings about the one everyone always brings up is are the eagles in Lord of the Rings coming at the end to
Yeah,
say to pick Frodo
yeah.
up. Everyone
It
brings
was
that up.
inevitable we were going to talk about the Eagles.
Yeah. So everyone always brings this one up, especially because it looks like a classical Deus Ex Machina, like literally very, very like heavenly imagery of the eagles coming down with Gandalf.
Yes,
Like
they
it looks
literally
like
come
a
down from the sky. Yeah.
yes. So I would say literarily watching the movies, I get why someone would think, oh, Deus Ex Machina, blah, blah, blah. But I also think this is an example of a Deus Ex Machina that works fairly well in the sense that one, on a meta level, it's like everyone loves those movies and that story so much. Everyone's just kind of okay that they didn't take the Eagles. I feel it's like, nah, that was a better story anyway that they didn't. But also the Eagles are kind of they're at the very least in the world before we get to that end point. We see Gandalf using them before, so there's at least precedent. So yeah, kind of end point there. Deus Ex Machina, I would give it to you, but it kind of works well. It's framed in the story.
I
But
agree.
also
I didn't
just
have a problem with it when I saw it, frankly. I know people
yeah.
get very upset, but I don't know. I don't think it's a problem.
No. But just to put Lord of the Rings people to bed a little or to rest a little bit, it's like
Before they
they're
send
kind
angry
of
emails to us.
just because like one, just because an animal's in the world doesn't mean it likes to be ridden. And that's kind of the eagles, but just it's a very human mindset to be like, oh, giant animal, of course they'll let me ride it. The Eagles are very much so above the humans, the human problems in that world, and they really don't like to get involved. It's like kind of Hagrid when he tells Harry Potter to go visit the spiders, and it's like, oh, we don't eat Hagrid because he's our friend. We will definitely eat you. That's kind of the Eagles. It's like, yeah, we let Gandalf ride us because he's one of the most powerful beings in the world, and also two, we are friends with him. He's like a good guy. We don't otherwise really get involved. So it's very much so like kind of a miracle they let him use them at all. And it's only in certain scenarios, but they kind of really need to be convinced. They're not just like, yeah, we're a horse, you can ride us. They're very, but anyways, that's in the books though. So
Okay. Yeah, the Eagles is a good example. For me, I think I was partly not bothered by that as a Deus Ex Machina because I don't think it was a situation that the film had kind of already ended by that point. How they
hmm.
get back, that really wasn't an issue. You could have just had the
Yeah.
forces of Mordor retreating and then maybe the good guys flooded in and picked them up on the way. So it's not like it solved some intractable problem. Something I read online was it seems like a Deus Ex Machina happens seems like it anyway, when a writer writes themselves into a corner and their protagonists get into a situation where there seems like there is no way out. And again, this is just how it seems to read a Deus Ex Machina. It seems like the author does it out of desperation because, well, shit, there's nothing else that my protagonist can do here. Now I have to have some kind of intervention. And I don't think that was the case with the Eagles.
No. You make a good point by saying they've already concluded the conflict. Frodo's already completed his arc, or for the most part, a little bit more. But a lot of things have concluded. We've seen them do it of their own volition first, and then the Eagles come in for it's resolution, it's falling action. So it's
falling action. Yeah. That segues into a question I wanted to ask you guys, because there are lots of things like the Eagles, at least according to us, that seem Deus Ex Machina-ish, but we don't mind them. Or there's arguments online about what constitutes a Deus Ex Machina and what constitutes a plot twist. What do you guys think the differences are? Because twist definitely rhymes with Deus Ex Machina. In both cases, it's something that we didn't see coming that suddenly changes up the story, and sometimes a twist can help resolve a story in the protagonist's favor. So let me give you an example before you answer. When I was doing the research for this, a lot of people pointed to how old do you guys remember Jurassic Park, the first film?
Jurassic Park is going to be one of my examples of like one that should be a Deus Ex Machina, but it totally works.
The T-Rex at the end, spoilers for Jurassic Park, it's like 30 years old, but there we go. The T-Rex coming in. Okay. The family surrounded by velociraptors.
I guess it's not something that resolves the story, but it resolves the scene. But I don't feel like people watch it and go like, what? God, get out of here. Because it's like a big, grand moment and it's exciting and stuff.
Yeah. Agreed. The family surrounded by velociraptors seems they're going to be eaten. All of a sudden, a T-Rex busts in and eats the velociraptors and the family can escape. Now, a lot of people say that was a Deus Ex Machina. On the back of that, where do you guys think the line is between Deus Ex Machina and plot twist? Like, what's the difference? Why do we accept one and hate the other?
I would say, and this isn't true for all examples, but typically a Deus Ex Machina or Deus Ex Machina kind of resolves everything, and it doesn't, as we were saying, like it results in there not being any consequences of what just happened. Whereas twists, not always, but they usually complicate things, and then they may not resolve everything, but usually the characters have to deal with the repercussions of the twist, and that's what the next part of the story is always about. It's about the reaction, it's about what happens next. It's about the calamity that this twist has caused, or the way in which this twist has even resolved the situation. There is still that period afterwards where the repercussions are dealt with, which is always good.
We have a whole episode on twists. It's one of the recent ones, so feel free to go and listen to an entire episode just about twists. But one of the big things is that a twist is usually, or a twist that works really, really well is in conversation with the rest of the story. And a twist will usually, what it does is it's the phenomenon of having the entire story recontextualized suddenly in a moment for the reader, or at least parts of the story. It's taking information the reader already has and suddenly reframing it. And it's that expert reframing that is so satisfying and so shocking, because it's a magic trick, essentially. Deus Ex Machina is not usually is not in conversation with the rest of the story. It comes out of nowhere. It's someone setting up a magic trick and then pulling off a resolution that had nothing to do with what the setup for the trick was. So the audience is just like, oh, well, I didn't know there was a box over there with a, like, I don't know. It's not, none of the information is given to the reader. So
I really like that idea of as a reframing, because you can't reframe if the pieces aren't there.
Right.
It's just making stuff up. Like the pieces of the story have to already be there to be reframed, which is what a twist is, right?
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that we hate twists that aren't set up well. Like if you just bring in a twist that doesn't make sense, that hasn't been foreshadowed, that's the same as it's not the same as Deus Ex Machina, but we have the same response to it. Where we're just like, that's bullshit. You can't get away with that.
Yeah.
Yes. Does the Deus Ex Machina have to come at the end of a story, or at least toward the end? Does it have to be the thing that resolves the big whatever it is in the plot?
Well, I don't think so. I think you could say that if a single conflict is kind of resolved in a contrived way, you can call that a Deus Ex Machina. But I think it's when it happens at the end of a story and resolves the the main problem of the story, the main conflict of the story, then it feels particularly egregious, and that's the one that kind of stands out. But I think you can cheekily get your way out of a scene with something that's contrived, and people are justified in saying that's a Deus Ex Machina. Because I think writers often pursue. It can be very tempting to like raise the stakes and make things worse in your characters, and then you go, "Oh God, well, how do I get my characters out of that?" And at that point, you need to go back and do the work of building them an escape route, or even dropping the stakes a little bit in order to give them some way out. But sometimes people are like, "No, well, I'll just have this happen," and people will swallow it. People will accept it. And don't always.
I think it can happen earlier in the story. I don't have any example or don't even know if I've seen it, but it would
I can
be
think of a few.
but it would be like because the scene I typically think of is like, and this actually happens a lot. Like if I think of sort of Deus Ex Machina elements earlier in a movie or a book, it's like, characters are cornered in a fight scene. What's going to happen? And then some savvy forest elf comes out and snipes everyone and jumps down and introduces themselves. That's Deus Ex Machina-esque. The difference is it's at the beginning of the story, and that's part of setup. You're introducing a character, you're showing the audience they're savvy, you're showing the audience that, and then they follow along for the rest of the adventure. That's part of the setup of the story, and that's their introduction. So it's different. So what for me, a Deus Ex Machina in the beginning of the story would be if that happened and then the elf left and nobody ever talked about them again. And it was just like, oh, okay, are we gonna talk about
Yes.
that really savvy elf, or that's just not part of the
Yeah.
story? It's like, no, nothing to do with the story. That just
I
happened.
suppose if it happens midway through, there's time to contextualize the big Deus Ex Machina in terms of the story. You can normalize it. But it's when it happens at the very end that there's not enough time to normalize it, that's what the audience is left with.
Yes.
That's probably also why it's so annoying, because we're left sitting in the cinema or whatever, looking at each other, being like, wait, what? Why? They're not going to explain that? That just happened and we're not getting any more information? Are you serious? I paid $20 for that. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
I don't know if have you heard about the four types of Deus Ex Machina, Paddy?
I have that on my screen right
Nice.
now,
Okay,
Phoenix,
cool.
actually. But
Cool.
I have four types, so I'd like to see if they coincide with your four types.
Yeah, yep.
Were you deliberately setting that up?
No,
Setting
no,
that up?
I wanted to talk about this, but I was like, I feel like Patty's going to talk about this. So
No,
I
why
was,
don't
yeah.
you, Phoenix? Why don't you take it over?
Okay,
What
yeah,
are the four kinds that you found?
these are the four types that I found. Also, I want to give a disclaimer because I took these notes a while ago because we were initially going to record this a few months ago. But so I took these notes a while ago. So some of these things written here are, I know from a video that I'd found and some research I was doing and stuff. And then some of these notes on here I know are my own thoughts, but it's hard for me to distinguish between the two now.
Let's just say that they're
So
all
you're
your
about
thoughts.
to
It's
you're about to
all
get
original Phoenix.
you're going to get a conglomeration of two brilliant thinkers. But anyway, the four main types that I have are changing the rules,
Yep.
unknown information, cavalry to the rescue, and pure coincidence. Those are the four I have.
They're pretty close to mine. Do you want to define each of those?
Changing the rules would be like, some rule is established in like
Neo can only use spoiler for the Matrix. 3, 2, 1. Neo's powers only work within the Matrix. Suddenly they work in the real world.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people gave for that. Now, I think that's actually not a Deus Ex Machina because it implies that perhaps the real world isn't itself a Matrix and it's a Matrix within a Matrix. If you haven't seen the Matrix, this is going to be absolutely fucking meaningless to you. But yeah, that's what people point to a lot. Is like, why does Neo's magic work in the real world? No, that's not what we signed up for. Yeah.
I feel like that was a Deus Ex Machina because I feel like it wasn't foreshadowed or like that question was never posed. So it kind of felt like it came out. I know that it goes on to tell something more, but it kind of just hits out of nowhere and feels like an inconsistency or a breaking of the rules within the story.
I found it intriguing, and I thought it was in the spirit of the Matrix because it's already, now we're getting into the Matrix. It was already about people that thought their reality was real, and it turns out it's a digital construct. And it always had the question of how do you know your reality isn't a digital construct hanging over it? So to then imply that the world that the characters thought was real was also a construct, I thought could have always been implied from that big meta question hanging over the film. But a lot of people thought it was bullshit. So yeah, I accept
Mm.
that it's probably a Deus Ex Machina. Anyway.
But it's a sign that it's a Deus Ex Machina as well is if it requires the audience to do a bit of head canon, head gymnastics to kind of make it fit.
Yeah.
That's a sign. That's a sign of some rough writing in general. But that doesn't mean that, like Paddy, like if you enjoyed it and did feel it in spirit, that also doesn't mean that that's not valid. Like I like that you like it.
But it also doesn't mean it's not a Deus Ex Machina. It could just be a
Mm,
Deus Ex Machina that happens to work for you, because
yeah,
sometimes they do. And again,
yeah.
War of the Worlds, I'd like to talk about that later.
hmm But basically, yeah, changing the rules is like there are some moments when authors put in like a hard no or like a hard rule, and that helps like give the story stability. It's like it's an agreement between the author and the reader. This is something I cannot break. And that makes it interesting for the reader because you know the author is held to these rules. If at the end they suddenly say like to get the protagonist out of a situation, if suddenly they just break that rule to get them out and then reestablish the rule or whatever, then it feels cheap. It's like, oh, you broke the one rule we had. Like we had an agreement. You
Yep.
weren't going to do that. That's
Yeah.
changing the rules. Unknown information, that would be like the magic trick that I was talking about at the beginning. Like someone's like, um, here's a ball, follow the ball, and you know they're putting the ball, whatever, it disappeared, and then they are like, actually, it doesn't even disappear. They're like, follow the ball, and then before they open their hand, they're like, and over there's a rabbit in that hat, and it's like that. What? Okay, I wasn't that. What does that have to do with anything? Like so.
Yeah.
It's unknown information. It's like, well, that's not amazing to me because I didn't know the hat or the rabbit were
Yeah.
even part of the information. Cavalry to the rescue, that's like
The T-Rex.
that's the T-Rex. It's someone just coming in to rescue. Pure coincidence is just something happens to happen. It's coincidence. By pure coincidence, they get out of a situation. Yeah, I can go into, I have notes on all these, but I'll just, that's a high level for all of them for right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, mine basically aligned with those. The only difference I had was actually no, they're exactly the same with different names. So great, we've solved
Ah,
this. There
what
are
are your
four different
names?
kinds. My names were Resolution by Accident, which
Mm.
is the example I saw was Wizard of Oz, right? Dorothy happens to
Ah.
throw water on the Wicked Witch, and then
hmm
she melts, which is also an example of Resolution by Coincidence, because by coincidence, the witch just happens to be allergic to water. That's absolutely terrible, by the way. I only saw the end of Wizard of Oz recently to research this. That's total bullshit. Why do people laud this movie? That is such a bad ending. It's two different types of data smack stacked on top of each other.
There weren't
Absolutely.
many movies at that time, so they were just
Yeah.
excited to have a new one.
Yeah, I'm probably overthinking it as well. Anyway, so
No.
resolution by coincidence, resolution by accident, changing the rules, and here comes the cavalry.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That is something that I think is worth mentioning though about the Wizard of Oz thing or just older things in general. Like we as readers and stuff do like our tastes are evolving for what we find interesting and
Yes.
what sort of works for us as well as our social political context. Like back when Deus Ex Machina was like a thing in Greek plays and stuff like that. Like a lot of the media was way more like it was very religious. And so it was more like almost like religious. I could see it being more like religious propaganda being sort of the spirit. Like, and then Zeus comes down and saves everyone. Isn't that great? Because we all love Zeus. Um, so just stuff like that. Or like I think like more it's kind of in line with like the I don't know what is it like the political propaganda or something where back in the day where it used to be like and then the king saves everyone because we all love the king. God bless the king. And it's like that sort of thing. And the audience is more primed for that. Now our mentality is not there at all. So it feels cheap.
There's an awful lot of stories in which the resolution comes at the end because someone's valor or someone's goodness is recognized, and someone kind of steps in and goes, "Oh, don't worry about any of this. We've seen your deeds and we know you're a good person, and now we're going to set you on a good track." An example of that I really like, and I don't think it's a Deus Ex Machina at all, is A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger.
Ah,
Because they kind of set up that he knew the Black Prince or the Dark Prince or whatever he was posing as, So they set up that he knew him and that he'd met him. So for him to come in and kind of save him at the end works. But there's an awful lot of stories where that relationship isn't pre-existing. Someone just comes in and says, we recognize you're a good person. And then we're a lot more likely to accept that because we're like, yes, if we be good people, good things will happen. But that's not at all. That's not at all how things work.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. There's something kind of culturally contingent about it is set up for us if we expect in our stories a good person to have a good resolution. Maybe it was not so much a Deus Ex Machina for the ancient Greeks, even though it was literally Deus Ex Machina, but because to them, the idea that divine intervention could suddenly come and save someone is almost something that they expected or something that was part of their storytelling tradition already. So it didn't feel like cheap out of nowhere bullshit. Not sure how much that makes sense, but
that was always my thinking as well, that it was a lot more likely for them to accept it if they believed, because an awful lot of aside, like an awful lot of old folklore tales involve interaction. Certainly, I was like in polytheistic religions where people believe like the trees are alive and the rivers are alive and things like this. Those stories often resolve themselves by nature or the gods intervening in some way, because they're a lot more likely to accept it because they believed it, and it's often as a result of the person's behavior in some way. But I think that the Deus Ex Machina just became such a cliche that people started saying that this is dull, and then as religions changed, and then as kind of relationships with the gods started to change,
yes,
people's perspectives of that, I think that's when the Deus Ex Machina became really kind of like, that can't happen or that can't work like that.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. And also, in the example I gave, Medea, we are told at the beginning that Medea is the daughter of Helios, the sun god. So maybe the audience would mean like, I see what's going to happen here. She's going to ride away in a chariot. So yeah, something may well have been lost. I really want to talk about War of the Worlds and any other examples if you guys have of things which are undoubtedly Deus Ex Machinas, but they work. So do you guys know, and spoiler for War of the Worlds, which is like 70 years old now or something, but do you guys know how War of the Worlds ends?
Yes. Oh, I'm familiar with the film, and I'm familiar with the book, or at least the
audio
the
drama
reading.
original
Yes,
was?
yeah, Orson
Yeah,
Welles.
that's what I'm talking about. Do you want to give the listeners who may not know like a brief like what
Yes.
is the Deus Ex Machina we're talking about?
So I'll give a quick overview that in War of the Worlds, aliens come. They absolutely devastate our defenses. They're well on the way to taking over the world. At the end of the story, our character is kind of just a lone figure wandering through desolation. There's no signs of people. There's no signs of anything. And then he comes across one of the alien kind of machines that the aliens walk around in, and he realizes that the aliens are actually dead inside it. And it's revealed that they just got germs from being on Earth, that they had been so long in their planet and their advanced technology that they had eradicated all the germs. They had no immune system. So when they landed on Earth, they kind of just died from our bacteria. And yeah, that's that.
Yeah. So I love that.
I will jump in and say that I see that as a kind of cavalry to the rescue. And I really like that as an ending.
Microbial cavalry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I really like it to the rescue.
I think it works. Yeah.
Yep. I think that is. I think that's a good example of cavalry to rescue. Do you guys think that ending works?
I think it works. Yeah. I think within the context of that, because I feel like that story was all these little vignettes, and that final one is it just feels so bleak and it just feels so lonesome that he's given up and he decides to charge up to this machine, and then it turns out that it's dead and there are things that are dead. And within the context of sci-fi, it kind of feels like, oh, that's actually quite clever that happened, that they wouldn't have thought of that because they would have been so long without that kind of thing. It would be the idea of us going and invading another planet and then being like, oh, there's something here that we never expected that was totally normal to that and to those people. So I quite liked it. I thought it fit. I felt like when I watched the film, the Tom Cruise film, it felt way more like it came out of nowhere. It didn't feel like it fit the scene, or it didn't feel like it really fit the vibe of the film. So I feel like people who watched that and were like, what kind of ending is this? I feel like they're a lot more justified in being annoyed about it. But I thought it worked quite well in the original.
Interesting. I think I might agree about the film, but Phoenix, so have you seen the film or read the book or Are you
No, my only
okay?
exposure to the War of the World is a piece I edited for someone who for this one little publishing house. They're doing something really cool. It hasn't come out yet, so I'm not going to say too much, but they're doing something in conversation with it, and that's my only exposure to it. That's all I'll say because it's not released yet, but.
Okay, that's almost kind of perfect then, because as someone who doesn't know the story, hearing that as James described that, like, what are your feelings about that on as an ending?
Mm. I thought it was a bit of a Deus Ex Machina until you started talking about him coming up, walking up to the machine, because that to me feels like a character climax moment, and that summoning of the courage and just saying, "Fuck it, whatever, like whatever, you've invaded our planet, I'm coming up to you now." That is a very climactic
That's
human, like that
interesting.
comes from the protagonist right there. And so for that to then be rewarded with it's kind of like the David and the Goliath
Ah,
without they don't see the stone being slung really, but it's that I'm coming up to you. He's already faced them. And then what happens at he's
okay.
stood his ground.
That's really interesting. So part of the problem with the Deus Ex Machina then it sounds like is also that it takes the resolution out of the hands of the protagonist. It's not the
100%.
protagonist's doing right. We haven't touched on that yet, I think. I
I have that
think.
written down.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to
I just
unpack
like
some of this one? I'm so glad you've done so much research for this.
this is this is one of those notes where I can't remember. I was like, did I think of this or was this from the video? I think this was a little bit of a mix,
No,
but
this is all you.
it's this but it's the idea of like, especially for actually specifically, I have it under Cavalry to the Rescue. One of the big questions is, do they solve the problem for the protagonist or do they solve the problem with the protagonist? And
Mm.
that's a big distinction. And we talk about this a lot. This is a big writing tip in general, is you want to keep in general, you want to keep your characters active. If they go passive, if things start happening to them or for them, then chances are there's something in the story that can be reworked a little bit. There's something structural there. So in general, general trip, chick trick, keep the protagonist involved. If a cavalry comes and just takes the plot out of the main character's hands, that's when it can be really egregious. But if they come in and the main character is still involved, so it's like, what would that be like? It's like, I don't know, like let's say the main bad person is facing the protagonist, and they also have an army, but then suddenly an army comes in and starts taking the army on for the protagonist, like, we got that, you go over there, and then the main character then still has to fight the main bad. That's cavalry to the rescue, but it's to support the main character
Yeah,
in their ultimate goal, which is
I
still
like
then
that.
very interesting. Yeah.
I feel like I've
Well,
even seen that exact scenario in a fantasy film. I
Oh,
can't think
the
absolutely.
what, but
towers,
it's on
the
the
two
tip of my
towers.
brain.
Two
That's
Okay,
towers.
the moment
Yeah.
in the two
there we
towers.
go.
They decide
Yep.
to like ride out into battle, and then Gandalf happens to come in at the same time.
Yep.
Yes, he
Hmm.
does. Okay.
Yeah. And for the just to not to stick on the War of Worlds for too long, that whole story is told kind of from the idea like the character doesn't have any real agency within that story. It's kind of
Yes.
told in the way that
Mm.
you're just a person and this larger force is invading. So he's kind of just an observer, kind of going from place to place, kind of caught up in this big battle, trying to survive and seeing his side losing. So the idea that that war is resolved without him having any involvement makes sense. The ending that we get is sort of just the moment that he realizes, oh, we've won, kind of.
Mm.
Yeah. I love that ending myself. I think it's a brilliant ending, even though I think it's undoubtedly a Deus Ex Machina. Because to me, thematically, it fits. Even if there
Mm.
wasn't like something saying, oh, but unbeknownst to the aliens, tiny microbes were brewing under their noses. Thematically, it's almost the cosmic horror thing. Large cosmic forces out of anyone's control came and waged war. Large cosmic forces out of anyone's control ended that war.
Mm.
It's if the story was about humanity being powerless and ignorant of the stars, that's turned around on the aliens. It turns out that they were ignorant and powerless as well. They never factored in microbes.
Hmm.
It kind of does make sense as well. Like it
I
kind of
think it
like, well,
works
of
quite
course
well,
microbes
actually.
were, yeah, of course microbes
Yeah.
were there, and they were going to be a threat to the aliens. We've seen this play out in colonization stories all
Yeah,
through history.
Hmm.
absolutely.
Okay, cool. We've solved it. That's a good one. Great.
Yeah.
Glad we
That's
ticked
just
that.
good. Yep.
Phoenix, do you have more from your wonderful ream of research that you want to share with us, or any
Um,
other points that you want to touch on?
Oh, one thing that I've touched on this briefly before, with coincidence in general. This was a note I got from a video essay on Avatar: The Last Airbender a while ago, and it kind of came up again with this, or my thoughts anyway. It was still in my thoughts, but with coincidence. Coincidence to get a character out of something is like a Deus Ex Machina, and people tend to lose interest in it. But coincidence, when it reflects badly and creates repercussions, people tend to like it. So if you use coincidence
Hmm.
to complicate something, that can be quite good, or generally is more interesting than
Okay.
if you use coincidence to take something out, like to remove complication.
Do you have an example
Just a
of that?
fun. No, my mind went to Dumb and Dumber, but this doesn't. Okay, this is okay. Dumb and Dumber.
Great film.
This is a little bit of this happening. Um, at some point, Jim Carrey or someone really pisses off this like really big, bulky like biker guy, and then they ride away, and it's like, whoa, they got out of that one. That's great. And then later on, he's going to the bathroom and he sees like some number written on the like a number written on the stall, like call for a good time. Or it's like meet at this cubicle at this time on this day for a good time. And it happens to be that exact time, that exact like he's there, and then someone comes to the cubicle and it's that exact same bulky guy that he like pissed off before. And it's total coincidence, but
I
it
remember that. That's really good.
complicates things and it makes it more interesting versus the opposite. If some coincidence happened that just pulled him out of that situation before we got to see what cool, interesting thing got to
Yeah.
happen, it's not as
And
satisfying.
I don't have a specific example either, but I'm trying to think. I'm thinking of any scene where the characters have something and it's like really do or die. It's on a razor's edge, and there's a just so thing that just happens to go wrong. Like
Mm.
one bolt in the spaceship was loose and it causes the whole thing to shake apart. I mean, if that happens, like it's great. That's fire. We want that. So yeah, I mean that's a
Mhm.
perfect example of like if the coincidence goes against the protagonist, then we love it.
Yeah, especially if the authors, we trust the author's voice and we know this is a savvy author, they're gonna like, I'm curious to see what they're going to do to get to work with this complication further. If you trust that the author is going to work with it well, then it's like, ooh, I'm interested because this just got way more intense. Coincidence is one that I think is particularly interesting because it doesn't work in literature because it's like, oh, well, you're an author, you can say whatever you want on the page, so obviously it's not that interesting. But coincidence works amazingly in real life and video games because we don't have actual control over these destiny weaving things. So when they actually happen, it is like, that was incredible. That was amazing. I can't believe that worked out. And it was total coincidence, total accident. They are incredible moments. So it's like, why don't they work in literature? And it's because of that whole like, because there's nothing stopping us from writing anything on the page. So if we want to make a coincidence work,
Hmm.
and to capture that feeling of like it's a whole new ball game to try to create the sensation of a coincidence of divine intervention, if you want to call it that, and make it feel satisfying in literature when you're working with someone, when you're basically working with God, who is like, I can make anything happen, so how can I make this interesting? And that's why it needs to be in conversation, it needs to be framed
Yeah.
within the context of the story for it to land and be like, that was cool.
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Like, kind of related to what you were saying. Yeah, I think it is. Like, we want to see the author thread the needle as well. We want to see
Hmm.
the author be deft with the stories, and even yeah, like you were saying, in real life, we can have these coincidences happen. We're not like, oh God, why did that happen? That's
Yeah.
annoying. We love it, but with an author, maybe it's that we hold them to a standard, and we want to see them do the, I'm gonna use the term magic trick again of like threading the
Hmm.
needle, making the amazing chain of cause and effect, and we don't want to
Hmm.
see them take the easy way out.
Hmm.
I don't know. It is odd that we don't like it in stories, but we love it in real life.
I'm
Hmm.
thinking specifically of does any of you remember? I think it's Escape from LA with
Yeah, I love that. I
Kurt
love that
Russell,
film.
right? The scene where he has to shoot the basketball into the hoops. Is that I think that's that one, and he's given
It's been a
the
long time.
challenge of like he has to basically get 10 shots in like 20 seconds or something. And the way it works, that obviously each time he takes a shot, he has to run farther to get the ball to go the next way. So you have like the clock ticking down and the audience watching it each time he's taking the shot from farther and farther away. And then finally he just like one arm hooks it from all the way across the court. And it goes in right at second one. And obviously that would be totally boring in a book. Like how do you can't make that dynamic because you have to watch the ball go and then the clock go down, and it would be so dull if you were reading that.
Yes, it only works as a montage.
Yeah.
With Snake Plissken.
Snake Plissken, thank you. Yes, what a name.
Yeah.
And his eye patch, yes.
That film is burned into my memory. So yeah, Deus Ex Machina. Is there anything else we want to say about this before we draw this to a close?
I think I would just say that the ones that I was thinking of that I liked are all examples of the cavalry coming to the rescue, and I feel like I'm a lot more accepting of that because it kind of feels like it could happen within the context of the story, like the T-Rex
often it does.
Park, the air raid bombing at the end of Saving Private Ryan, and then a bunch of examples of like Gandalf and the horses coming in. Like a lot of those are Deus Ex Machina, but I feel like they don't feel as egregious to me within the context of the story because you're like, yes, they could come at the nick of time, and that can happen.
Yeah, I suppose there's always the implication that the cavalry is out there. In a World War II film, for there to be like a sudden airstrike, I mean, yeah, but it's war. Like, do we really need to say that? Anyway, yeah, I would agree with that. Phoenix, anything you want to add before we...
One other point that I remember from my research that I saw people bring up is that one area where Deus Ex Machina, like really pure Deus Ex Machina, tends to work well is satire, when they're trying to be funny and kind of taking the piss.
Yes.
The example I saw a bunch was Monty Python and I forget which one, but Monty Python does it where literally like it's a fantasy, and I think at the very end it's resolved because a bunch of police pull up and start saying you can't do this, and like just stuff like that.
Yeah. They're investigating a murder that happened earlier in the film.
And in that case it works really well because it's it's the voice, it's what they're going for, it's in conversation with what's going on.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen the Kaufman film adaptations, but there's literally a scene where the main character goes to like a writer's convention or something, and there's the writer they've all paid to see saying like, and whatever you do not use a Deus Ex Machina in your script. That I will burn your script if that happens. It's the worst thing in the world. And the film basically resolves with a Deus Ex Machina. It's quite clever at the time, but they're playing with that. When it's a satire, it's good. It works.
And even that has setup. They're setting you up.
So
Yes.
Yeah. Deus Ex Machinas, generally don't use them, but if you do, just be a genius. That's basically the takeaway.
And in case you didn't know, Deus Ex Machina literally means God from the machine, but in Latin. So
yeah, lower down on the weak cream. Well, Phoenix, I think you have a quote about Deus Ex Machinas for us. Is that right? Do you have a quote?
Let me see if I could find one here. I do have a quote. This is from Robert Ebert's review of Kazam, which I find very funny. Genies are only fun in the movies if you define and limit their powers. Boom.
So true. Because the problem of a Deus Ex Machina, of course, is that it feels like the author is just saying like, whatever, anything can happen. But no, there should be rules. There should be structure. We don't want to completely break the audience's expectation after setting up the cans and can-nots of a story for 150 pages. If you set that up, you're going to feel like Roger Ebert, and your genie's not going to be fun. It's going to be the genie from Kazam. I haven't seen Kazam, but if Robert Ebert didn't like it, I'm sure it wasn't great. James, I think you have a much harsher quote for us. Just, excuse my French, shits all over the idea of a Deus Ex Machina. Do you want to
Yes, so this one's from Robert McKee, and I think this speaks to how much hate people have and how much load people have for Deus Ex Machinas when they are more egregious. So Robert McKee says, Deus Ex Machina not only erases all meaning and emotion, it's an insult to the audience. Each of us knows we must choose and act for better or worse to determine the meaning of our lives. Deus Ex Machina is an insult because it is a lie.
It is a lie.
It is a lie.
Robert McKay coming in hard.
Yeah, because we do have really strong feelings about this.
Yeah. The reason that we read stories is to see how people deal with things and respond to things and live through that and vicariously through the story. So if the story is going to contrive to have it work out for them in the end, it's kind of just like, why did I engage with this in the first place?
Yeah, well said. Well, thanks very much. This has been Pros and Cons. This has been Deus Ex Machinas. If you like us, please leave a review if you can. It's the only way that the algorithm really sees us. If you want to hear what we've actually written, or read what we've actually written, we have written an anthology called The New Mythic. It is science fiction, it is horror, it is sci-fi. That's out now at all good retailers and on audiobook. It's great.
Also, I would just like to shout out JB Sprigg from YouTube. He left a comment on our back on James and I had a discussion about Dan Simmons and JB Springs. He had another book recommendation by by Dan Simmons, the man, called Flashback, released in 2011. It's a near future murder mystery that escalates by the end to crazy levels. James Cameron meets Robert Ludlum in a way. Really good. So thank you very much, JB Sprigg, for that. If anyone out there is looking for more Dan Simmons fun, Flashback by Dan Simmons, check it out.
That's a good write-up.
I will check that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sprigg. So, James, what are the pros of a Deus Ex Machina?
It gets you out of a hard spot as a writer. And yeah, it gets you out of a hard spot as a writer, and maybe audience members will accept it.
Yeah, true. And Phoenix, what are the cons, other than what we've just said for like the last hour?
Look, you never ever really know when or if a T-Rex is gonna bust through your wall and just be up in your space. So that's a con for sure.
Wise words.
And then God came in and ended the podcast.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.